Welcome to Testimony Mountain. It's such a joy to be back with Veronica Swift, and we're just excited to explore some things today regarding discernment, how we walk out this journey. And so I just welcome you, Veronica, and wherever you want to start.
Hi, Adina. It's so great to be with you again. This is exciting. Ah, it's been kind of a little bit of adventure. This is the fourth podcast show I've done, and I'm enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would. So, really glad to be here. Really glad to be with you. Glad to be back. And excited to talk about whatever's on the plate for today, wherever God leads us.
Yeah, and I know kind of beginning this journey, I followed a lot of people that I no longer follow because
Yeah, yeah.
their true colors came out eventually, and I know that, partly from my background in the system, I was programmed, to, the Lord actually spoke to me about it recently called dumb blonde programming, and it
No.
really is a thing.
Wow.
And, so, I think I'm fairly intelligent in quite a few ways, but, I can be very gullible. And so,
Yeah.
we just like to
Boy.
talk about how we walk out discernment in this age.
Yeah, yeah, this is a really it's very, timely, and it's very much on my mind, and a lot of people's minds. I get a lot of messages from folks about, this person or that person, or how do we work through, because it's almost a working through of figuring out what exactly is going on.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who can put out a really good front for a certain period of time, but then they crack or they break or something slips, and then boom, and you're like, "Ooh, what's going on there?" And over time you realize, okay, what they've been presenting is what Jesse Zaboter would call a cover
Yeah.
story or a cover life, and what Caleb Jade has called a dual life. It's that
Mhm.
facade,
Right.
and a lot of them bring that to social media, or they bring it to whatever table, podcast that they're presenting, and it doesn't last. And then what do you do? Because you've believed everything they've said, and then you got to wonder what was true and what was not true, and how do you move forward after someone that you trust breaks that trust? And that's not just true for people in the SRA community. We're talking about everybody is trying to figure this out on a bigger level. So the whole kind of what I've just recently heard Gene Deco talk about as the patriot movement versus the truther movement, or kind of what Chantel calls the Christians versus the believers, right? There's a lot of fine lines out there, and a lot of us, a lot of us have been taken in, and then, woo, what do you do then? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's tough because a lot of, things can be really good, sound good, and, some things we want to be true, particularly, in that patriot movement and things like that. Yeah, we wanna believe the white hats are in control and everything's gonna turn out
Right.
fine, and we're just waiting, and then waiting,
Yeah.
and then waiting, and then
And
waiting.
waiting some more.
Yes.
Yeah, and then some weird things happen, and, after you've been kind of, I just plain think of it as brainwashing at this point.
Yeah.
After you've been brainwashed by someone for so long, then they come out with something that's really contrary
Mhm.
to the tone and the direction that they've been going in, and our minds, I think they literally gloss over it, and they're like, "Yeah, I noticed that, but it doesn't fit in with so
Mhm.
much of the other stuff that we've heard. So I'm just gonna ignore it. I'm gonna ignore it because it's because I'm a good person, and if I make a mistake, then I would want other people to ignore, my little slip up. But
Yeah.
for them, it's really not a slip up, it's really the truth of where they are, the truth of who they are
Yeah.
coming out in that moment of, when they forgot to keep their facade up. So
Yeah.
that's the difficulty, is who's playing this game with us,
Mhm.
and who's actually just a genuine human being who made a mistake at one point.
Yeah.
And that is the thing that everybody's trying to figure out. Not just me, not just you. We're all walking through that right now.
Yeah. And I think the foundation is, not really following anybody but the true Lord Jesus Christ
Yeah.
because That is
Yes.
where our safety and security is. People will
Exactly.
let us down,
Yeah.
and I even
Yeah.
tell the groups that I work with, it's like, don't follow me because I
Mhm.
could be we all have our blind spots.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and so check everything I say,
Right.
with scripture, with the Spirit of God within you, walk it out
Yeah.
um, that way.
That was part of the very first, post I think I ever did. Now I'm thinking back 3 years, so, um, and I'm 300 plus posts into it, so I don't wanna quote myself too hard, but, that I basically said that this is who I am, this is who I've been, and my fundamental the fundamental place that I walk is that I'm an imperfect Christian, so I'm not gonna get it right, and I can look at these things and I can write about them. I said that in my book too. There is no way I can tell you that everything is 100% absolute truth, because when you're asking a 4-year-old, a
Mhm.
4-year-old's memory, you're not going to get perfect truth no matter what you do, so and that's this whole systems,
Mhm.
they rely on that.
Yeah.
That is their ace in the hole that, "Well, you can't verify this because and so if you can't verify it, then it doesn't exist." Well, that's baloney,
Yep.
and you can't verify anybody's memory either, but that doesn't certainly mean that it doesn't exist. It absolutely does. Absolutely does. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for us, the it comes down to not living out of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but living out of the tree of life. And
Mhm.
it was kind of a paradigm the Lord showed us several years ago. And it was kind of abrupt for me because the Lord was like, "You're living most of your life out of the tree of knowledge of good and evil." And I was like, "No,
Mhm.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm a good Christian." It's like, that's the point. You're all
Right.
focused on good,
Right.
and I think it's where a lot of deception comes in is Christians don't understand the dark side and the light side of the system.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and
Yeah.
so it's like, well, if it's good, then it's good. It must be from God. And it's like,
Yeah.
nope. It
No.
doesn't work
That
that way.
Yeah, that's a huge shocker. That was a huge shocker to me to realize that they have a perceived good side with people who are staunch, quote unquote, Christians who but they aren't. And they're not living a Christian life, and they are in the pulpits everywhere, and they are in the hierarchy of the churches everywhere, and they specifically position themselves everywhere, specifically to take us on this journey where, we're led astray.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's astonishing. It boggles my mind. And then you have to back up. You have to back up and say, "Oh, okay, I gotta go backwards here and start over and restart learning." I feel like that's where I began, I learned the first time somebody said something about giants and Nephilim, I was like, "What does that have to do with anything?" Yeah. Why are we talking about this? I don't understand. We never talked about the Old Testament and the Bible. It's like, churches, they just kind of avoid the whole giant and fallen angelic and ritual sacrifice. And the Babylonian thing is a lovely little story that we never ever talk about. And ignoring all that is so light side to me. It's so
Mhm.
deceptive. It's fundamentally part of Christianity,
Yeah.
and it's such an odd thing to me, 'cause and I've said it before to myself and to other people, I don't feel like I really started to understand the point, what Jesus did for us.
Yeah.
What is the point? Because you can't really understand that until and unless you understand the depth, the level of wickedness, the evil. If you don't if you don't have any recognition of the evil, if you don't look at that evil, if you ignore it, there is no way to understand the New Testament,
Yeah.
so the churches, they go full on all out New Testament, and there's like a foundation lacking, they haven't built the cement foundation for the house, instead they're building the roof first. It's like, "Okay, this just doesn't quite make sense." So that's the way I felt for a long time. This just doesn't quite make sense. I mean, I like it. it's a great feeling. It's a great, being good is a wonderful thing,
Mhm.
but there's no reason to be good except if you have I don't even know what to call it. It's not a foundation. It's, a purpose. There's a
Mhm.
purpose in doing it.
Yeah.
When it's purposeful, that is transformative. It's so different than just doing it because you like the ladies at church and you enjoy the meetings and you like having your little women's group and the knitting group and all those things that you're part of. Those are lovely, but they're not transformative in the way that understanding that evil is.
It's such a good point, and I love that. And I was doing some teaching on the emotions of God for transformations, a course that I teach, and it was really interesting, kind of because that kind of dualistic, where God of the Old Testament is kind of angry and evil, and not evil, but he's angry,
Right.
and then we have sweet Jesus in the New Testament, and we just focus. Well, we're in the New Testament now, so we just focus on sweet Jesus.
Mhm.
And it was like, well, you have these two places in at the beginning of Jesus's ministry and at the end of his ministry where, he's in the temple, he's, forming a whip and turning
Yeah.
over the tables. And and so it's interesting how, again, we just gloss over and go, oh, it's just the sweet Jesus's love, and he never gets angry, and he's not upset with anything. And yet to go, okay, in 3.5 years, he had two instances, of documented where he's angry at sin and he's
Yeah.
taking a stand, you
Yeah.
know. And then you look at the Old Testament and it spans hundreds of years. But when you just kind of read it outside of culture and time and space and not understanding giants and Nephilim and
Yeah.
all of that, you look like, wow, he's mean. I don't like that God in the Old Testament. But go, no, there's so much of his mercy and love in there too.
Yeah.
But you're compressing it all into this one space instead of looking at over hundreds of years. Um,
Yeah.
well, he got angry and well, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he got angry. I think too people are uh, the whole anger thing, I think it goes even deeper than that because, people will say, "Well, you're not supposed to get angry. You're supposed to let your anger go. You're not supposed to, have those violent feelings or those feelings of rage or those, you're not supposed to have a righteous anger in and of itself, or even not a righteous anger, but just a feeling of anger at something in the world that isn't right. No, you're supposed to calm down and hold it in and they kind of ignore that part of Jesus's
Yeah,
experience in favor of everybody has to be nice to one another all the time,
yeah,
and it's not real. It's
yeah.
not real. It's not Christianity. If you don't get mad at evil,
Mhm.
I don't know. What position are you in then? Are
Yeah,
you just and that's almost the whole tolerance thing that politically and socially we've been pushed into, right? You have to tolerate all this evil. You have to tolerate all the LGBTQ trans,
mhm,
ripping the skin off the arm of a kid to create a fake appendage that never works and causes them no end of trouble. You have to tolerate this mutilation of children. You have to tolerate it because we say you have to tolerate it.
yeah,
And then behind that, of course, is the fact that they're doing it because that's a gift, a worship of Baphomet.
yeah,
But you can't say that out loud. Goodness gracious, you'd get fired, in many places. It would be so incredibly unacceptable to get angry at that. So they've shoved that righteous anger down. They've shoved that kind of male instinct to get really angry and to act upon
mhm,
the bad things that are happening in society, and they've done it so effectively. We're really a kind of a peacefully accepting a lot of the evil that is coming along, and the people who don't peacefully accept it are really marginalized in many places,
yeah.
especially in cities and things. So, yeah, the whole "we can't get angry," and Jesus was just lovely and kind all the time. It's such a perversion of the reality of it.
Yeah. And I think that that's the key is understanding God's unconditional love for people, I fully believe in, but at the
Yeah.
same time, being able to be angry at what they do.
Mhm.
And, it's like if you had 2 children and one, raped and killed one of your children, if you weren't angry about that,
Yeah.
something's wrong with you. Obviously, you would grieve for the, one child, but the other, you would still love them as your child, but you would hate what they did. You would
Yeah.
be angry about it.
You'd be angry
And,
about it. Yep.
I think that that's part of understanding paradox, of being able to have 2 emotions at the same time. And, with God, it's like he wouldn't be safe if he's not upset about, you know, what happened to me, the abuse that happened to me. He's not a safe God, you know? If
Right.
I come to him and
Exactly.
like, "Oh, this happened to me, and this happened to me," and he's like, "Oh, it's no big deal. I take care of it. It's all done at the
Mhm.
cross," or whatever. It's like,
Right.
you're not safe.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
and, where you can have Jesus turning the temple, the tables over in the temple, but within a short period of time, I think that same week, he died for those very people.
Yeah.
And so for me, righteous indignation, you also have to have that love,
Yeah.
which I don't agree with just hang 'em, burn 'em, you know, we're just
No.
angry to be angry.
Yeah.
But when you can go, those are people who God created and he loves. He
Yeah.
still loves.
Mhm.
At the same time, this sin, what they're doing is not acceptable.
It's not okay. Yeah. I think a lot of people, well, as, a former educator, also part of the very first blog I ever wrote, I mentioned that because a lot of people kinda gloss over the early stuff, but it really does tell you a lot about, who I am and where I'm coming from, and there's a lot of people who completely ignore that in favor of other other completely made up ideas, we'll just say. Um, but I saw a lot of that in order to keep compassion and anger and hold them both at the same time, you have to be able to hold 2 disparate ideas in your mind at the same time. You have to be able to focus on 2 separate ideas at once, and they have done a really good job. I say the system as they have done an incredibly good job of really preventing kids from ever learning how to do that.
Yeah.
It's not just it's in school for sure. They don't want children to ever have a discussion about anything, far be it a discussion about anything difficult or what they would consider difficult or challenging. They don't want them to try to do 2 things at once. It's kind of an important skill to learn for kids to be able to do multiple things kind of at the same time. They don't want them to do anything but rote memorization kind of a deal. You can't talk about it. You can't have anything that's confusing. Kids come up these days against something that they don't perfectly understand, and it's a stressor to the point that they develop severe anxiety about it. So they've kind of funneled, and this is not just kids these days. This is we're talking entire generations of children have gone through this system now. So we have adults now who cannot hold 2 ideas. They can't think about 2 separate things at once. They've never done debate, they've never lost an argument. They've never had an argument because they've never had to have this conversation. So it's almost been programmed out of people to be able to think like that. And if you can't think like that, it really becomes difficult to function in the world. I think I got off on a little tangent there, sorry. But I was
No.
just thinking about
Yeah.
that because
Yeah.
it really is important. And the other thing I was thinking of, I just pulled a post off of Instagram the other day, that reminded me of this, you can't ever get angry thing. It's also, I think, really deeply related to trauma. This post, I'll read it to you. Seeing only the best in people is not always a virtue. It's
Mhm.
more often than not a trauma response and a survival tool that will not allow you to see the dark and evil that people can carry and be willfully choosing to live in order to protect yourself from having to address all the ways that others have violated, disrespected, and abused you in life. So when you don't wanna see those things or can't see them, then you don't get angry. So that's also another aspect of it. So multiple things play into it. Really important to be able to see first and then to have appropriate emotions.
It's so good because, I was raised with, in my home, there was no anger, no
Yeah.
anything. It was all good and positive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and then I married a man who had an anger issue, of course. And, it was a challenge, but neither one of those are, what God intends. It is that, where we're able to have that range of emotion, but know how to process it in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And that is the path.
Yeah, that's the path we need to go on. It's the healthy part. I was raised where I couldn't get angry, or I was told, "Well, when you're angry, I can't hear you."
Hmm,
So it was a shutdown mode, and a if you're going to, if you're gonna have any emotion that I can't handle, well, then I'm just gonna shut you down and not
yeah.
listen. So that brings its own, you know, cataclysmic kind of hurling yourself off a cliff kind of problems later on that you do have to relearn how to deal with people. You have to learn how to get angry
Mhm,
and be angry and even be angry with someone
mhm.
without, and have it be okay and emerge on the other side and say, okay, I worked through that, whatever that was. I worked through that in my mind, and it's okay to work through it, and it's good to emerge on the other side. But yeah, if you've been through trauma, boy, they really try to. It really messes with your emotions more than you can even ever. I can't even put it into words how much it messes with your emotions, and it's almost at that point a lifelong struggle to deal with relearning what you should have learned as a kid.
Yes. And
Yeah,
that's part of that emotional intelligence is learning, to feel, and then to, process and walk it out,
yeah, yeah.
have the vocabulary for it. Because kind of my, stuck was like my range of emotion was good and okay. So if someone asks me how I'm
Mm,
doing, it's good or okay because I can't be bad, I
right.
can't have a bad day because 'cause I'm supposed to be a Christian, and all of those
Yeah,
kinds of things.
yeah.
And so giving ourselves permission to be is really powerful.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, how do you walk out discerning, in your research and, what's credible, what's not credible? How do you kind of sift through walking that out? I'm just curious.
Yeah. That's a hard one. That it has been it's been a journey. And in the beginning especially, you just don't know. There's so much information out there. Well, I'll take a detour, right? I just listened to a conversation between Michael Salla and Leo Zagami. Now, Leo Zagami, well, I'm not very familiar with Leo Zagami. I've had to kind of process my way through many, many different people. So he's someone that I'm just coming to understand, but he's Italian and he came out of the Italian Illuminati. He's
Mhm,
related, I think, on one side of his lineage to the Queen Mother in Britain, and on the other side to something I can't remember at the moment because I've just heard this one portion of the show yesterday, I think. So
mhm,
um, and Michael Salla is like a big, big time exopolitics researcher. So
mhm,
he chats with all the, Montauk and UFO guys and gray alien people and the folks that channel whoever.
yeah,
We know that they're channeling, we would say that they're channeling demons, but
yep,
he would not say that. So
yeah,
Leo Sakami is just basically beating him up because, like, "Nope, this was my
really,
experience, and what you know, what you've heard from other people, nope, that's not how it works." Um, so and I've seen this a lot in interviewers recently. I see it more and more in Carrie Cassidy these days, that
mhm,
they get themselves really, really immersed in what they think is
mm,
correct, and then they're faced with an opposite piece of information, and
mhm,
again, just like the kids, they kinda can't hold both of them in their mind at the same time, and they get really mad. Michael Salla got really mad at Leo Zagami and cut him off a number of times and didn't wanna listen to him and Carrie Cassidy has this notion that JFK Jr. is going to save the world, and JFK Jr. is 107. And, I respect all of these people based on, the longevity of time that they've been doing this, and the people that they've interviewed, and I respect the people that they've interviewed. But, you got to have an open mind. And again, that was one of the really, really early posts I wrote. I'm like, I really can't dump any information. I can't say it doesn't exist or it never happened or I don't believe it. I just have to open my mind and say, these are people's experiences and I want to understand them.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, I I looked at a wide variety of different sources.
Mhm.
And a lot of people say, "Oh, she just writes on Jesse's about her," and that's really not true.
Yeah.
I have a wide variety of different posts that I've made about a wide variety of different things. The truth of the matter is that the biggest posts, readership-wise, are about Jesse Zaboter, and a lot of people just don't read the other posts
Yeah.
and haven't read back through them. So the perception is that I only write about Jesse. The reality is that I have hundreds and hundreds of different sources that I look through for information. So the baseline for me was keep a really open mind. And that's because I have a research background. And one of the things you cannot do in research is have a preconceived idea of what the end result is going to be when you start out, because that is called bias.
Yeah.
And it decimates your end results,
Mhm.
or it decimates your credibility when you mouth off and say, I think I know what this is, this is going to be this and this is going to be that. And then your results say something different. And then you have to eat your words. And I've seen people have to do that.
Mhm.
Or they get their mind in kind of a twist because they have this strongly held preconceived idea, and it colors all of the thoughts that they have about what they're doing, and then they can't take in that one bit of information that may lead them in a totally different direction. It may actually lead them towards the truth versus where their mind has kind of strangulated the information, which takes them down a different path. So you either have a really open mind when you're a researcher, and then you take the information that you are looking at and you just try to understand it. That's really the first step in research, which
Mhm.
I don't really consider what I do to be research per se. I guess you could call it research. I guess I think of it more like investigation at this point. I'm
Mhm.
investigating these things, I'm looking into them, I'm trying to make sense of them for myself, and I'm walking that journey out with everybody. So everybody's watching me in print in real time
Mhm.
as I mull through what I'm learning. And
Mhm.
some of it may be correct and some of it may not be, but I'm not making that judgment, right? It's a Christian walk, so it's a judge not walk. I'm not
Mhm.
judging what I'm looking at. I'm not judging whether it's right or wrong. I'm not, um, I'm I'm attempting to keep any preconceived notions that I might have far away from what I'm doing when I'm looking at the information. I certainly don't understand a lot of it, especially in the beginning. Um, but not understanding something, in my mind, is not a reason to discard it. It is, however, a reason for many people to discard things.
Mhm.
I don't understand this, or this doesn't make sense, therefore it isn't true. And that is faulty logic.
Yeah.
You cannot come to a correct conclusion or an end destination that's real and true if your logic along the way is faulty. So that's been really how I started. And then my secret is that I keep an open mind and I take in all the information until the puzzle pieces start to form a picture. And as the picture forms, you're going to see whether the picture is consistent. You're going to see whether it deviates a lot. You're going to see whether it starts out as one thing and morphs into something else. You're gonna see whether whether the parts fit with one another or not. Like, I wrote a post way early on about a guy named David, in, Southern Oregon, around the Ashland, Medford area in Oregon, and
Mhm.
he had an experience where someone he called named Mike Pence, as in Vice President Mike Pence, came with a group of people and did a bunch of stuff on his family's horse ranch, and, There was a lot of things that surrounded that. One of the things that I pulled off at that point was a denim and diamonds advertisement for a fundraiser. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. I don't know what, there's something about this that's just curious to me. Well, fast forward 3 years later, in the post that I just wrote this past, was it past Wednesday? I think it was last Wednesday. Also had a fundraiser for something and diamonds. I think it was champagne and diamonds. I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. Are these related? Is this like a signal? Is it is it Q? Is X, whatever the X might be, something and diamonds? Is that a fundraiser cue for the brotherhood? Is it a communication that they're putting out between one another? So like if I had made that decision way back when in the early post to like say, well, this doesn't make sense to me, so I'm not going to include it. Then I would have lost that ability to connect it perhaps with something now. Now, maybe something will come up in a year or two and it'll triangulate and make a bigger connection. I still don't know what it means, but it's a puzzling thing that you would have 2 fundraisers with the same idea in them, and they're all diamonds, and we know what, based on what Jesse has told us about diamonds, we know how critical they are for interdimensional travel and cues and comms between people, and they represent beta kitty sex slaves in some ways. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of messages that diamonds can give within the brotherhood system. So that's just to illustrate. I try to take in the information, and I try to keep the pieces that don't really, the puzzle pieces don't really fit together with anything particularly at the time that I write it, and collect enough of them so that maybe they start to fit together and make a bigger picture. So that's part of discernment, is having an open mind. And then as time has gone along, I found more and more evidence that certain individuals were not who they say they were. One of the bigger ones is a very popular individual that George on the Reveal Report has on regularly. And I'm not going to say this lady's name, but I've written a couple posts about her. But I started out just trying to gather information. She was curious to me. I heard someone who had been interviewed by Chantal on Aquarius Rising Africa. She'd interviewed this gentleman. I can't remember his name. I think it might have been David. She interviewed him 4 times, and he kept mentioning this woman's name over and over and over. And I thought, well, I'm not getting anything out of this particular guy's interview, but he keeps mentioning this woman. Maybe I should shift over and look into her. So I did. And then, as more and more information comes forward, then the picture emerges that this woman is not who she says she is. And we don't know exactly who she is, but everything points towards, some kind of disinformation or gatekeeping, or, I have a definite idea of who she is now. And, so it's bits and pieces of information, pulling them all in. And unfortunately, in this genre, because everything is so disparate and it's so compartmentalized, each survivor has their own bits, right? And you've got to learn each story and all of their experiences, and then put them together and say, all right, these all coordinate. That there's destination and area coordination, right? So many people talk about Bohemian Grove. Fiona Barnett talks about Bohemian Grove, and David Schroeder, and there's just a whole list of people who have bits and pieces about Bohemian Grove. And then, of course, you've got the outside information, which maybe isn't so outside, like the whole Alex Jones, I infiltrated Bohemian Grove and I have pictures of that. Was it an infiltration, or is he an insider? We don't really know. But it's a question to keep in mind, and as you pull together. And then I did another post on a order called the International Order of Saint Hubertus, which Jesse has come out with all these orders, and I'm thinking, man, are all these orders really brotherhood, just subdivisions? That's a question of mine. So is the International Order of Saint Hubertus a brotherhood order? So I thought, well, I'm going to look into that, and sure enough, for the chapter opening for the first American chapter of the International Order of Saint Hubertus was, guess where, at the Bohemian Club in San Francisco. And on the bottom of their invitation is this little logo that Jessie Zaboter has already said in one of her affidavits is a specific kind of brotherhood logo. And it's on the menu. And then, so there's all these there are little bits of connections here and there. The brotherhood is really good at subdividing and compartmentalizing and hiding things from people, and it's so much on a need to know basis, right? So pulling stuff together is kind of the next step, and looking for the pieces that fit or don't fit, looking for the things that are questionable or not questionable, and still keeping a really open mind. Go
I
ahead.
so appreciate that, and I so appreciate you in being willing to do all the minutia research and investigation, because a lot of us don't have the time or the skill or
Yeah.
the patience to do that. And so it really helps to bring it to the forefront. And that's part of what the body of Christ is meant to be, is
Yeah.
we all have a different, function to come together. And I just so appreciate your skill in that, because we desperately need it.
Thank
Um,
you. Yeah. I've heard from a lot of people. When the whole entire first pretty much year, I wasn't really in contact with very many people. There was one person who persistently emailed me, and so, there was that, but aside from comments here and there, I didn't get a whole lot of feedback, and to be quite honest, I didn't realize until very recently, like within the past couple of months, that anything that I was doing was valuable to anybody. So I really and I talked with God about this in the beginning, 'cause I'm like, I feel like this is a very selfish endeavor. I'm doing this for myself. I wanna know. I'm interested. I feel like I have to give back, though, because selfishness for me doesn't cut it, really. So I thought, well, I'll put it out there, and I don't think anybody's gonna read it, and, um but if a couple people read it, then I'll
mhm,
be really happy about it. If one person gets something out of it, that's good. And now I think as time has gone on, um, people will email me and say, "Wow." I get a lot of survivors who email me and say, "I can't believe this particular post that I didn't think much of when I wrote it," right? I'm so glad that color or that bit of information, it triggered all this information, all these recollections for me, and I'm starting to understand maybe what happened to me
mhm.
because of what you've written, and that for me is such a blessing, because boy, if it can help people
Mhm.
who are struggling with what happened to me, and what is this behemoth, and how do I fit in, and maybe I'm not nuts, and these are not just I'm not imagining this. This is real. I experienced it. So I think that's fabulous. And you know what? I think it scares the bejeepus out of the system. I
Yeah.
really do. Because they treat me like I am enemy number 2 almost.
Mhm.
So what about that? That's been confusing for me for a long time. I don't really get what's so dangerous about this, but this is dangerous because
Yeah.
it helps people figure out what's going on, especially on the survivor level. So I'm very happy to wear that wear that hat. Uh,
Yeah, and I know a lot of us, I'm a lot shyer on public stuff, and so, I've read your blog for a long time, but never commented or never,
mhm,
expressed my gratitude. And I find that in our ministry as well, is, sometimes particularly, like when we started broadcasting, you're just sitting in your little studio and you don't really think about people out there. And I
yeah,
think I told you this privately, but the first time we went out to a conference where there was other people who were part of, that movement, um, we were in the elevator going up to the meetings, and we overheard someone go, "I can't believe I'm in the elevator with Gil Hodges," my husband. You know, and
yeah,
then all of a sudden it was like, "Oh my goodness, people recognize us. Oh no, and my husband and I were joking. We're like, well, we can't, argue on the way to breakfast in the morning because we don't know who might be around.
Yeah.
And of course, we believe in transparency and not worrying about those kinds of things and being genuinely ourselves. But
Right.
it is that place where, you don't always realize what it means,
Yeah.
and who's watching. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
I started Testimony Mountain, because the Lord said to do it, not
Right.
because I want a fan base or that I actually enjoy doing this, because it's still a little stressful for me to get on
Yeah.
camera and do this. But,
Right.
when we do it as obedience to the Lord, there is beautiful fruit from it. And so I honor what you do.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it is a lot of work. It's, I
Mhm,
think, much more work than most people realize. Y you see a finished product, but, there's hundreds of hours
mhm,
that go into each post in ways that you probably don't realize because it's not like that information just falls in my lap, you know?
mhm,
It's that each of the 40 different references I put in some means I've had to listen to 40 videos, or I've had to hunt down 40 books, or I've had to read 40 books, or I've had to, remember that I read something somewhere at some point and then go hunt it down because it's an important piece to this puzzle that I've put together. But
yeah.
luckily, I've had a lot I get really bored really fast. So, somebody said to me the other day, "You never quit, do you?" I'm like, "No, I just don't. I just keep going." Because, what else am I gonna do? And to be honest, in the beginning, I worked a lot outside, and I
Mm,
got hot because I was in an area that was much warmer than I really kind of prefer. I got warm, I'd come in, I'd put 4 fans on me, like, 1 at one side of my head, 1 at the other, 2 at my feet, 1 at my back, however many I had. I'm like, "Okay, I gotta dry off," and I would just sit for 20 minutes, and I'd do, as much as I could until I was dried off, and I'd go mow the lawn or whatever else I had to
mhm.
do. So, for me, it's not really work, it's a break from a different kind of work. Sometimes that helps, just if you're tired of the work that you're doing, just doing something different feels
Different.
like a vacation a little bit, so yeah, so I'm happy to do it, and there it's not just me. I say this a lot, but there are a lot of people who are really invested in learning.
Mhm.
They're invested in learning what's going on, and they work a full-time job, they don't have
Yeah.
time to do it. Um There's a lot of people in that boat. There's a lot of people who are willing to put their time and energy and money into,
Mhm.
um, getting the information that I then turn around and present in blog form.
Yeah.
So it's not just me, it's a lot of people, and I feel a responsibility to them for
Mhm.
their input, and I feel a responsibility to to people out there because there just aren't very many people writing about this stuff.
Yeah.
It's hard to find. It's a niche market, one, but it's also difficult, it's a challenge to find someone else who's doing it in depth. There aren't very many of us. Yeah.
Well, we are very grateful, and I really appreciate that, the holding it loosely and having an open mind. And I think that that's something that in the church, at least I grew up in a denomination that believed we had all the truth and everybody else was wrong, and was it
Mm.
eventually going to come to our truth.
Right.
Um, we tend to be that, black and white and boxed in. Um, and so even just expanding my own understanding of things, and at first there was rabbit trails that you're like, ooh, maybe that
Mm.
is true. And then
Yep.
realizing, oh, there's actually other aspects of that,
Yeah.
like star seed understanding and different things, and reincarnation and stuff like that, of going,
Right.
when you hear, instead of just facts, but when you actually hear someone saying a story
Yeah.
that they really believe is true, it's not as easy to dismiss. But then,
No.
understanding the system and how they work, now, I can, somebody who says, "Oh, I have these past life,
Right.
things," is I have compassion because they really believe it.
Yeah.
And reincarnation was the only box they could put it in.
Yeah.
Uh, but now understanding, how the system can mess with you in so many
Yeah.
different ways,
Oh,
it's
man,
like,
yeah.
okay, I believe you that you feel those things, you have those memories, and I want to validate that. I'm
Yeah.
not going to agree necessarily that you had a past life and it was reincarnation or something, but I there's enough other explanations from the system that I can have compassion and honor to you
Yeah.
instead of just pushing you out the door and I don't believe you.
Yeah. No, I've never had that urge. I've never had the urge to tell anybody, "I don't believe you." I've always had just the curiosity. I think a lot of people don't have the curiosity,
Yeah,
and they want their own they want their own mindset.
yeah.
And that's fine, but it doesn't really work in this genre. It doesn't work at all, and it doesn't work well for the person that you're disbelieving, and it doesn't work well for you in a learning situation either. So, yeah, I got to thinking while you were saying that about now, I've uh, the whole fall understanding fallen angelics and coming back into the realm of the Nephilim, and then you get into then you get into dimensions and
Yes.
realms and interdimensional travel and
Mhm.
stargates and spiritual gates and portals and all these things I don't wanna believe exists. At least I don't wanna believe that my heaven has technology. That's been I'm like, "Please, I just wanna go to, like, the pastoral I want the sheep, and I want the river and the grass and the warm but so these other dimensions, they have technology. That has taken me an incredibly long time to wrap my head around.
Yeah.
It's something that not only requires an open mind, but, stretch it a little bit further
Mhm.
than for me anyway, because I never wanted to believe UFOs were real. I've never been a UFO alien, you know, what's that movie where with the Men in Black, right? I've never
Mhm.
been a Men in Black kind of mindset.
Mhm.
So that's been really wildly eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Jerusha Icebold, who I just
Mhm.
discovered.
Mhm.
She's apparently got 10 or 12 books out on Amazon
Mm.
and talks about all her experiences. I've listened to a couple of podcasts but listening to her talk about, okay, being sucked back into a different time stream and different timeline, and it's the same problem I have mentally trying to follow the Montauk information that was put out about, I went back in time and then I was born again to a different parent, and, your brain's going like, "Ah!" And I file it again under, well, okay, here's another puzzle piece that
Yeah.
I don't really understand at the moment, and maybe I will in the future. Ooh,
Yeah.
and the vocabulary, and you see that with the Brotherhood. You see them
Mhm.
constantly changing words on us, so
Yeah.
we're always off guard, and we never know what exactly anybody means at a given time. And then there's the words that they just don't exist in common parlance, right? You can't go and talk to s you ca I can't go and talk to my neighbor about the difference between a Stargate and a portal. You know, the whole terminology, the vocabulary hasn't made its way into so how do you talk about somebody in church with it? Yeah, you have to use the words that are common or most well understood and that don't fit really well,
Mhm.
and that then people can say, "Well, because it doesn't fit really well and because it's something that I understand is slightly different or it's not supposed to be true, then I'm
Mhm.
just gonna shut it down."
Yeah.
And I see that a lot. It's really unfor so that's kind of I don't know.
No, I
Yeah.
totally get it, and that was part of my experience is because, the first year or 2 of my memories was all off-world stuff,
Oh.
and, I had listened to and read, Tony Rodriguez books and things like that,
Mhm.
and, so it was interesting because when I asked the Lord, um was I a 20 and back? Because, that seemed like it would make sense because some of the
Mhm.
memories, it was like, how can all of this be? And all of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I felt like the Lord said to me, I said, I don't want you to see it as the 20 and back. He said, I want you to just see it as timelines.
Yeah.
And and then I was working with a gal who I normally don't work with, and she was like, "Oh, well, let's just collapse all those timelines into one." And
Yeah. Yeah.
and she did, and sometimes I'm not 100% sure that that was the right thing to do, but God led us in it, and
Mhm.
it actually opened up a whole nother level of it opened up the SRA and the sex trafficking that I had
Yeah.
not been aware of. In fact, I'd been in this place of like, yeah, I have these kind of crazy memories off world, but that's not as bad as SRA. And at least that's not part of my experience
Yeah.
and all of that. But
Yeah.
when everything was brought into one, then now I've had the range of all of it together
Mhm.
to process. And so it is hard because it's like, okay, well, was that, virtual reality? Was it
Right.
programming?
Right.
Um, and so it is a journey of holding these things loosely and trusting in the Lord that He's going to sort it all out.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do believe, part of my passion, because it did start with the off-world stuff, was how do we uh, you know, you have the church who's completely shut down. We don't talk about this stuff. And then you have, experiencers in the UFO community, which I believe there's some deception over there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too.
And so it's like, okay, how do we come to this place of truth from the Lord that,
Yeah.
yes, there are these things that are going on, and yes, these things are happening, but it's not, this way out here, all aliens are good.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
you're going to save us, or they actually were our creator, and all of those kinds of
Yeah.
things. And
Well,
so,
I don't know, that's a really good question. It's something I and others have been attempting to figure out. I see and that goes back to, like, discernment and who's good and who's not good, and I'll tell you, I have sent my book and or individual blogs to a lot of people,
mhm,
and I've been watching I watch the responses, and the
mhm,
responses are astonishingly revealing
mhm,
about who is and isn't in the know and
mhm,
who's pretending they're not in the know or pretending they're just learning about these things or pretending they really don't have a clue, but they actually do. Because, I have one guy I sent a very famous guy writes a blog that's very well known, hundreds of thousands of, I
mhm.
sent I sent him my book and I'm like, "Yeah, what do you think?" His re literally, his response was, "It's really hard to write about that much material in such a short, be so concise about it." And I thought, "Wow," "Wow, what a response to have." Not, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know any of this existed," or, "Oh my gosh,"
Mhm.
or even this seems like total nonsense to me," so there's so many
Wow.
different ways these days to figure out who knows and who's playing a game with us online.
Yeah.
And I've had that opportunity by sending people the book. One person got really ticked off at me. Another person's assistant, basically sent a comm back that said that, "So and so my family is a chief high muckety muck in this organization, and this quote unquote organization just happens to be a very much a system organization." So I have been really astonished at how many individuals who have hundreds of thousands of followers online, they know exactly what's going on, and they are pretending they don't.
Yeah.
And they're bringing in, like, one of them. I'm not gonna mention names. I'll put it in a blog for, kind of behind the scenes later, but one of them just interviewed Gene Decode, and I listened to the whole interview, and I'm like, she's literally pretending that she doesn't know this piece of information. She's just heard it, and she's making this wild leap connection between what he said and something else, but there wasn't enough basis in what he said for her to make that connection. I'm like, Yeah, she knows what's going on.
Yeah.
She read the book or she already knew or, whatever. So it's hard though, because it's hard to say to the general public, "Hey, you're being deceived by so and so." They already know, and they're bringing out the problem is all these people, the quote unquote alternative media, the quote unquote white hats, the quote unquote patriots, the quote unquote truthers. I don't even know what to call them anymore. Um, I look at them all and I'm thinking they got big followings because of what? Because they're part of the group. They're part of the group. They're part of the cover up. They're part of the so I'm thinking, okay, yeah, that's one way I think to discern is how big is the following.
Yeah.
And you talked with me just before we started about the last post that came out yesterday that was written by my guest blogger, Thorny Justice. She
Mhm.
um, has identified a couple of different people in the up and coming rising star kind of category, the people who go from 0 to 300,000 followers in, a couple of months on X or on Truth Social or wherever their base of operations is. And she's like, wait a minute. Let's look into some of the details of what this individual has said.
Mhm.
And lo and behold, you look into it and there's just connection after connection after connection to the brotherhood, one after another, after another, after another. So they're being artificially buoyed, even though maybe 90% of what they say is perhaps accurate,
Yeah.
and 90% and 10% of it is maybe not. So we have to be really careful about those individuals. I like the fact that she just dove right into it and said, this is somebody to watch because you may
Yeah.
not want to watch him too close. It's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah,
I've
very interesting.
learned not to be impressed by numbers or
Right.
big people,
Yeah.
and I don't wanna be a big person. I just wanna be me and
Yeah,
just do what the Lord has called, me to do.
exactly. Exactly.
Um, I
It's
think
it's hard because it's seductive. Numbers are
yeah,
seductive, and they may or may not be real.
yeah.
You don't know if someone who clicks on a page actually read that what it was
Mhm.
there or just clicked and then clicked away. And you don't know if a number on like, for a view on a podcast is someone who came and watched 2.5 minutes and then clicked off. So or if they watched the whole thing, it could be either one. And
Mhm.
even if they watched the whole thing, did they actually absorb what they
Yeah,
watched? If they read the whole thing, did they absorb what they read? There's no way to measure that. There's no way to monitor that with just individual numbers. So it's much it's I think at this point it's much better to have a community and a depth
yes, yes.
because I think I don't know, 2024 just seems to me like it's gonna be an explosion of connections and an
Mm,
explosion of community, and I've talked to a number of different people that are like, I think it's time for me to start stepping out, and we're starting to see that on various platforms. People
yeah,
like myself have been like, "Nah, I don't think so." Are starting to talk, and it's not just me, it's a lot of other folks as well, so I'm curious and interested to see what happens. I'm looking forward to this, like, what are we all gonna do?
yeah.
What kind of things is this all gonna bring forward? It seems it's exciting. I think it's exciting for me. I know not a lot of people are not looking forward to 2024, but I am.
It is exciting times, and I think we were, born for such a time as this, and, it may be some very challenging times as well, and I think the importance of understanding these things, because I think at least the enemy is trying to set up for, what Scripture calls the great falling away of
Right.
tremendous deception.
Yeah.
And the things we've talked about today, even, in the schooling and even in the church, the education and stuff has been to be very close-minded,
Yeah.
very, that type of thing. And so I think it opens up the door for a lot. At the same time, I've seen where church members who, were in this very close bubble, and then you start opening the door, if they're not grounded, they just go crazy, and pretty soon they're not even following Jesus, they're following,
Yeah.
all these off types of things, and so in this time and season, how important to be grounded, and stay grounded in the Word of God and
Yeah.
Jesus, and in relationship, and, that's for me the solid place, is that,
Mhm.
relationship with Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is central,
Yes.
and I'm not moving from that.
Well, I'm not either because it's a position of strength, it's a position of safety, it's a position of, love and compassion and, uh, so many things that I can't even think of at the moment, you know?
Yeah,
When you step outside of that, you are at the whim of the buffeting winds, you know? You're at the risk of being swept along with the latest social fad and or the latest whatever, and that's never for me where it's been. It's
yeah,
just not and I think most people realize that. It's not the latest food craze, it's not the latest fashion craze, it's not the latest TV program, it's not the latest whatever it is, because those are all distractions from reality, and reality is who we are
yeah,
in Christ Jesus.
yeah. And in that, as we understand his heart, I think it helps us to view the world we're in, looking to see how can I have his heart of love and compassion while also being able to see, hey, this is not good stuff, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
And I think part of it too is understanding that not all of these people are conscious of what they're doing.
no,
I wasn't. I
no,
believe that, my role in the system was to be a Christian leader and eventually to bring in deception and bring down the downfall. Uh,
mhm,
Amanda Byes, made a quote that all survivors are weaponized to destroy the church. And
yeah,
that is
yeah,
it's a heartbreaking concept. But the good news is, and that's to me is where the focus is that because of what we've gone through, I believe that God's plan of restoration means that we know what the enemy's up to and
yeah,
his schemes, and when we come to know who we are and the power of Jesus, then we can do great damage to the enemy.
yes. I'm just starting I've never ever felt like a powerful person,
Mhm,
um, and so I've lately especially, I've wondered, well, not even lately, for the past couple of years, I'm wondering, why does anybody really care about if you're not subscribed to my blog and you can't read the posts,
mhm,
why on earth would anybody care about what I wrote, right? Like,
mhm.
so why do people make it their life passion and purpose to rip me up one side and down the other when they can't read what I write because they're not subscribed?
Yeah,
But I've come to the point to realize there's some power in it, whether it's public or not.
yeah,
And that's been an interesting process, mental process for me to get to. It's not that I'm powerful, it's that information is powerful.
mhm,
Connections are connecting with one another,
yeah,
which I think is some of what the blog does as well, is also powerful. And information in itself, knowledge in itself can be very powerful. And this has all been such a cult, such hidden stuff,
mhm.
that bringing it to the forefront and really piecing it together, which also seems to be something that the enemy is really afraid that people are going to piece things together, because that will make that's part of making the lie really fall apart fast. So, mm,
So true, so true. And so I think we'll wrap it up here today. And I so appreciate, Veronica, everything we've shared, what you've shared. Um, and also just want to release to those who are listening is you have a powerful testimony and a story as well. And
yeah,
you may think you're insignificant to all of this, but you matter. And
thank
as
you.
you allow the true Lord Jesus Christ to operate through you, uh, is that there's so much more that he has for all of us together in community.
Yeah.
And so just want to encourage you, if you have a testimony, let us know. We'd love to be able to share that as well. And so any last words, Veronica, before we wrap it up?
Thank you for having me on again. It's been a delight. I really enjoy talking to you, and I hope everybody listening gets something personal and good out of it as well.
Yeah, so good. So good.
Mhm.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time on
Okay.
Testimony Mountain.